So one of the problems that I'm having with the Rings of Power right now is the Númenorian storyline, and not just because of Galadriel, although she is definitely part of the problem. As is Halbrand, not because I dislike Halbrand necessarily, but because it seems likely that he's going to be Sauron, and it's just so on the nose and so flagrant, and beyond just the obviousness of it, it's the coincidence of it that bugs me. He just happened to run into Galadriel in the middle of the ocean, and I mean, what are the chances of that? Not good, I would wager. And even if there's some explanation for it, it just feels a little contrived. Anyways, though, Númenor itself is a problem simply because the Númenorians are sort of portrayed as petty and lame. You know, I mean, there's just so many problems with this. A lot of it's the condensed timeline. Since we don't know where to really anchor ourselves in the Second Age, because they've compressed pretty much all of it into one generation, you know, several thousand years they've compressed into one generation, it makes it sort of tough to know, you know, where everything and everybody stands within the storyline. For instance, you know, by the time Elendil and Isildur would be around, like, Sauron would have been back in Middle-earth for thousands of years. Their timeline corresponds with the fall of Númenor, right? But before the fall of Númenor, and before Ar-Pharazôn sort of, you know, goes and defeats Sauron and brings him back as a captive to Númenor, and what ultimately is corrupted by Sauron. Before all of that, the Númenorians had, you know, a long and interesting story. They've basically been gifted with longer life, greater stature. They're sort of like superhumans, right? This is how they're presented. They're superhumans. They've been given these gifts by the Valar because of their loyalty to the elves, and so for thousands of years, you know, they have this mighty, advanced seafaring nation that pretty much is like at the height of civilization, right? Compared to the men in Middle Earth who are in the Dark Ages. So when the Númenorians come to Middle Earth, you know, they bring with them a wealth of knowledge and culture that the Middle Earth humans simply don't have. This is often because of their relations with the elves. And over time, and this is a gross simplification, of course, but over time, things start to change. The men of Númenor become prideful and envious of the elves and become tyrannical towards the humans of Middle-earth, oftentimes, you know, basically like conquering and subjugating them, taxing them. They go a dark path, and they break off ties with the elves, and over time there's this separation into sort of the faithful and everybody else, right? In the present timeline that we're seeing in the show, you would have had Tar-Palantir, the king who was a part of the faithful, had tried to sort of get back into the good graces of the elves and repent for all the, you know, things that the Númenorians had done. But then when he dies and Miriel becomes queen, Ar-Pharazôn forces her into marriage and takes over. Now, Pharazôn he's a bad guy, right? But he's not just a scheming politician, he's also a warlord. And such a powerful warlord that he goes and defeats Sauron a second time. Because the Númenorians, and I skipped over this, sorry, but they had already fought against Sauron with the elves previously and defeated him and, you know, brought peace to Middle-earth, peace to the Westlands or whatever, and had made a new enemy in Sauron. But then later, under Ar-Pharazôn, who is not one of the faithful, right? He despises the elves. He goes with his vast army of 5 ships and 500 men. No, his vast army, and he's so powerful, and his army so enormous and intimidating that Sauron's own army runs away. Sauron is captured and brought back to Númenor, and then, like Wormtongue in Rohan, corrupts Pharazôn and leads to an even darker and more terrible version of Númenor, and eventually the fall of Númenor. Based mostly on the pride and envy of the Númenorians, who are, still at this point supermen. They're still taller. They live longer. You wouldn't see someone like Halbrand, a man of the Southlands, beating up 5 or 6 Númenorians, right? You wouldn't see this sword fight with Galadriel. I mean, sure, Galadriel could still beat a Númenorian in combat, right? Because she's super powerful, immortal elf. But, like, they wouldn't look like pathetic dunces. These are Númenorians. This is the ancestors of Aragorn. So the portrayal of Númenor, I've also said that the actual physical portrayal, like, I like the big statues and stuff, and there's some cool stuff with the ships and whatnot, although they look a little too clean. Like a lot of this area looks very clean, but it's so clean it looks like a set, and I've compared it to Las Vegas, like a Las Vegas casino. It doesn't capture the vastness or the majesty of what I would picture Númenor. Like, at first it started to, but then you see the limitations of what they've achieved. Like, this is the city of the world, right? This is the center of all civilization, and yet it looks small, and there's small crowds, and they only are sending 5 ships, well, now 3 ships, with several hundred men to the Southlands to have war against the orcs. The scale isn't there. The timeline is messed up. The people aren't portrayed like you would picture the ancestors of Aragorn. Halbrand strikes me as more Númenorian than the Númenorians, right? I don't think you could effectively CGI everyone to look like they were 7 feet tall or whatever. But realistically, the Númenorians are supposed to be, much closer to the ideal, right, than regular human beings. They're more beautiful. They're bigger, stronger, smarter, faster, and their civilization is supposed to be grand on the scale of Rome or Egypt. These monumental buildings and all of that. So people have brought up Egypt to say that they're supposed to look Egyptian also, but it's pretty clear that they're described mostly as being blonde and blue-eyed, except for the line of Elendil, which is darker. But I don't care about the racial stuff. By all means, make this giant seafaring nation the most diverse part of the show, because this is the one area that makes the most sense. Although, as a side note, I will just point out that the diversity in the Rings of Power is odd. It seems that they've picked a single black character for each race, right? A black elf, a black dwarf, a black hobbit, a black human to be central characters. But there's no Arabic, East Asian, or Latino characters as the main characters. I guess the diversity in this show is mostly just black and white. That's almost a story, a conversation to be had on a different video, though. Point is, the Númenorians don't really come across the way that most people would picture them. And the problem, if you're going to change the story, that's fine. I mean, most casual viewers aren't going to care. But you still have to portray this society in a way that makes sense for the story, which is a society that is not just made up of craftsmen and blacksmiths who are shown up instantly by Halbrand and all. Basically, everyone just seems kind of pathetic, right? One of the main characters is Isildur, and he's an absolute vapid waste of space. And Elendil just sort of smiles and goes along like a puppy dog on Galadriel's chain. These are not the characters from the stories. And the problem, if you're going to change things, you should still at least keep the spirit of the places and people alive, right? Sure, compress the timelines, but let's have it make sense still for who the Númenorians are and who people like Elendil and Isildur and all these different people are. And the show is just failing miserably at doing that. Which is either a problem with changing the timeline so drastically, or a problem with just a simple lack of vision and talent. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.